recap of what we did last week. We started talking about the Shema. The Shema is a very important prayer in Jewish life because we're told to say the Shema every day multiple times. The Shema is the first thing we teach our kids. It's the last thing the Jew says before they die. The Shema is, the Talmud tells us that the Shema incorporates all of the 10 Commandments within it, the very first paragraph. And the idea being where when we say the Shema, we kind of, in our heads, review all the core principles of Judaism. And in fact, the very first verse of the Shema, the first 6 words of the Shema, essentially incorporate everything about Judaism. How so? Pretty dramatic, 6 words. You could distill it all down to that. How do you have all of Judaism in 6 words? Seems like it's a really, really shorthand way to remember it all. Interestingly, when the Gentile came to Rabbi Akiva and says, "Teach me all of Torah on one leg," he told him something else. Perhaps he could have told him this: all of Judaism is really incorporated in the first word of the Shema. And the answer, by the way, to that question, it's a good question, I just thought of it right now, and the answer. The answer is that what Rabbi Akiva told him was the end result.
Love your neighbor.
And that is, precisely what it wasn't Rabbi Akiva, it was Hillel. Sorry, guys.
Yeah. He cited Hillel.
Right. Hillel came afterwards. Hillel came much afterwards. Hillel was one who said that this is a major principle in Judaism. Zeh klal gadol b'Torah. So Hillel, the guy came to Hillel and said, how to teach me all of Torah on one leg. So he told him, okay, you know what? That you don't like, don't do to others. Which is a play on words on the idea of love thy neighbor. Love thy fellow as yourself. Now, why would he not tell him Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad? According to our thesis that we established last week, that this first verse incorporates the entire Torah. Now, how does that do that? It does it because the first verse incorporates the first 2 of the 10 Commandments. First commandment is believe in God, right? That's Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu, right? God is our, Hashem is our God, and then Hashem Echad, Hashem is one. There's nothing else, and that is the second commandment of Thou shalt not have any other power. Don't assign anything else any power aside from God. And those 2, the first 2 of the 10 Commandments, which, by the way, the only ones we got from God himself, not via Moses, thus, when we say, famously in Deuteronomy, Torah tziva lanu Moshe. Anyone familiar with that verse? Torah tziva lanu Moshe, Mor Rashak Hilat Yaakov. Haven't heard that verse before? Okay, very good. So Moshe taught us Torah. The gematria of the word Torah. Anyone knows what the gematria? Everyone knows what gematria is, right? 611. Very good. Moshe taught us Torah. Moshe taught us 611. Why? Because the other 2, God taught us. Nice. Right? Because the first 2 of the 10 Commandments, God taught us himself. And we mentioned last week that the reason why God had to tell us the first 2 of the 10 Commandments was because God had teach us all the entire Torah, and incorporated in the entire Torah are 2 major core elements, and that's, number 1, every positive mitzvah is under the heading of doing what God told you to do because God told you to do it, and because God exists. That's the first of the 10 Commandments. And every one of the 365 negative commandments, don't do something, is because when you're doing something, you're going against God. And that's the second commandment, don't go against God. And the Shema incorporates the 2 of the 10 Commandments. Thus, the Shema really incorporates all of Judaism. Now, I would venture to say here that while indeed the theory of Judaism is incorporated in the first of the 10 Commandments, I would say the practice, how it would look once someone is done with that, it would look that you dislike, don't do to others. So like the idea of theory versus application. But either way, this alone, just the mere statement that we're saying here, that it's possible that all of the core precepts of Judaism, and not only that, really all the subsets, so everything about Judaism is incorporated in the first 6 words of the Shema, would make us realize its importance. And then when we find statements like Maimonides writes, that we should really spend years and years and years dwelling upon it.
What is the gematria of the first 6 letters of the Shema?
I don't know. It's a good question. You want me to do it right now? Stop right now and pull out the calculator. Well, Shema is 410. Yisrael is, 531. Yisrael, 541. Okay, but we're doing gemantras now.
What is it?
541 plus 410, that's the first two. That's what we wrote. Either way, that's... Yeah, so it's very important for us to spend some time on the Shema. That's essentially what we spoke about last week. This week, we're going to try to finish the entire thing. So what we have over here is, after we say the Shema, we say words in an undertone. What are these words? Baruch Shem Kvo Malchuto Olam Va'ed. Blessed is the name of His glorious kingdom for all eternity. Now, where do those words come from? Anyone knows where those words come from? Where in the Torah they're written?
Which one?
The words that we say in an undertone. Baruch Shem Kvo Malchuto Olam Va'ed. And why do we say them in an undertone?
The angels.
Except on Yom Kippur.
Because we don't want the angels to say it.
Ooh, you're nice. Yeah. So these words actually do not appear in the written Torah. However, the source for it is in two different places. Either it's possible that it came from Jacob. The Midrash says that when Jacob was about to die, so he called over his kids, and he was all worried, what's going to be with all his kids? And they told him, Shema Yisrael. And we know Jacob had another name. It wasn't just Jacob, it was also Israel. So here Yisrael, here Israel. Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad, as if they all testified to the fact that they believe in God totally. And Hashem Echad, Hashem is one. And then he was happy, and as I guess his expression of his happiness, he said, Baruch Shem Kvo Malchuto Olam Va'ed. That's what the Midrash says. Thus, we incorporate that as well. That's one source. The other source the Midrash brings is that when Moshe goes up to the heavens, and he's hanging out with angels, which in itself is a really dramatic, kind of, or perplexing narrative. How is Moses hanging out with angels? How does Moses go up there? We read a few weeks of the Parsha. Moses goes up and he doesn't eat for 40 days and 40 nights. How does he not die?
You explained it in one class previously.
I did?
Yeah.
Some of my repeating content, is that what you're saying?
No.
Some people were not there.
No. We should know.
That's
It's the interesting one. Huh?
More a commentary on that. We should have it right at the top of our brain since we
Well,
have
he had the spiritual side and the body side, and then you balance the two of them.
Okay, good. Either way, Moshe hears the angel saying it, and he kind of brings it down, which is, I'm saying that in itself, that whole episode is pretty interesting. It's like as if there's this angelic prayer that the angels kind of came up with on their own, or is it part of Torah? Is it something extra? And then we say it in undertone because we don't want to arouse the envy of the angels. So we say it in undertone. Well, they won't hear it because we say it in undertone. Really?
Yeah.
They're like, oh, we went under the radar. We did it only at like 2.5 decibels. That's below what they're, And then in Yom Kippur we say it out loud because Yom Kippur we're compared to angels, and that's why we don't eat and drink in Yom Kippur either. And we wear the white, and we have all the purity, and we're like the angels, and as if our soul is totally dominant in Yom Kippur. And then we have the license and the liberty to scream it out loud, and we're not worried with the angels. The whole thing is a little bit, I think, worthy of investigation. Like, what actually is going on? But either way, this is what we say right after the Shema. And by the way, to tell you guys another important role that these words play, Baruch Shem Kvo Malchuto Olam Va'ed, when someone says, nice. When someone says something, when someone says God's name in vain, by mistake, obviously, we don't say God's name in vain. Then right afterwards they should say they kind of could fix it right away by saying right afterwards Baruch Shem Kvo Malchuto Olam Va'ed. Interesting. Okay, so let's start the V'ahavta. Let's
So allow.
Huh?
Do we know what the name is? The name of the kingdom?
I don't know. The name of the right. I'm saying the idea of names of God. That's a big topic you want to open here.
That's the name of the kingdom.
Yeah. Okay.
Olam haba.
Forever and ever. I'm going to take it at It's a good question.
Name is, I mean, but is it referring to a name as?
Names and I'm saying this.
Like
Your question could extend a little bit further. What I'm pointing out here is that the whole idea of assigning names to God is a bizarre practice. And there's the name that we don't say, and then what the names refer to, and there's multiple names. And God tells Moses, "Oh, I prophesied, or Abraham prophesied, and I only came to him with this name, but I came to you with that name." And then there's the 42-letter name of God and the 72-letter name of God. The whole thing is a little bit of a mystery.
What I mean is it in reference to a specific name, or is it in reference to more of like the general concept of like if someone has a good name, they have a good reputation?
Maybe that's what it means. I would venture to say that probably it's a little bit more esoteric than that, but maybe probably that's a simple. There's a simple and there's deeper meanings to it. It's worthy of investigation. Either way, let's get into the next verse.
Right, you don't need the word Shem, right? And you can say, "Blessed be His glorious
Yeah,
kingdom."
the name of His kingdom. It's a little bit of a mysterious prayer, what exactly we're referring to. Okay, so let's start the V'ahavta. Now, we'll find like a very kind of harsh transition, I feel. Because when we talk about the first word, the words of the Shema, it's talking about this relationship we have with God, and we're accepting upon Him, so to speak, as our King, and we're submitting ourselves to Him. And like we said last week, that's not an easy thing at all. And if you think it's easy, then you're not doing it right. Because if it's easy, you're not really compromising on your individuality, on your independence. But it's very much a theoretical, I would say. It's not very practical, or it's very maybe intellectual, but not very emotional. And then we talk about we shall love Hashem, your God, with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your resources. Suddenly, we're talking about love. So what I would say, at least off the bat, is that what it's describing in verse number 1 of the Shema, it's describing a process that the very next step of that is emotion. It means how deep are we integrating this idea into our lives? I think that we have a tendency to make it very much an idea that's kind of out there that we maybe believe in, maybe we don't believe in. But either way, it's an idea. It's relegated to the realm of theory. When we talk about emotion, that's really who we are. That really was what mobilizes us and galvanizes us. And who we really are is what we feel. And what the Torah is telling us is that this idea of God, this God idea, if you will, vis-a-vis in respect to us accepting His dominion over us, the next step right after that is that we love God. And we love God how much? With all our resources, with all our heart, with all our soul.
But this is even stranger because it says, "You shall love." So it commands you
To have
to
love.
love God. Yeah.
Well, how do you love God?
There's a whole discussion about how can you be forced to love somebody. It's not somebody, but
Some entity.
some entity.
Well, okay. How do you love God? And by the way, this is a mistranslation.
With all your heart.
With all your heart. The real words are with all your hearts.
Yes. Mm-hmm. But the second one is with all your heart.
About that.
And the second one is heart. The second one is in singular.
With your soul. Yeah. B'chol nafshecha. Right.
Is it souls? Or just
No, it's not souls. It's just hearts and soul. And with all your resources. Now, I want to analyze this verse very critically. So we have to love God. So you said, right off the bat, Diego, that there's a problem. How we love God.
Well,
What's
one
the
is
process?
how you love God.
Yeah. And then there's the degree.
And the second
of
one is
how
somebody
much-
telling you love your brother. And
How do you
nobody
compel
can force you.
How do you compel someone to have an emotion? That's the first question. The second one is
And there are two. One is how do you love God?
how
And the
is it
second one is how
expressed?
can you force somebody to love God?
Means how do you attain it or how do you express
Right,
it?
you know how to love
Well,
somebody,
yes.
a person, right? But loving.
Well, we're told we have to fear God as well. There's in fact one verse a few weeks ago in the parsha we read that you have to love God and fear God in the same verse.
Yeah.
Which is this, seems to be even contradictory modes of relationship.
It's like parents. You love them, but then if you do something wrong,
But it's not that strange, right? We all fear our wives.
We
And we
don't.
love them.
Who
We
talk
all-
for yourself? Okay, so yeah, I think that's a good point. And in fact, by the way, the Torah itself, when it talks about loving parent or honoring parents and fearing parents, it does in the same verse equate that to God. And the Talmud makes a big deal about it. It says, well, there's three partners in man, Father, Mother, and God, and thus, when you ignore one, you're ignoring the other one as well. So it does do that together. We have to fear our parents like we fear God, or honor our parents like we would honor God. Very, very interesting. But either way, so let's just try to do some basics here. So what the Talmud points out here, we love God with all our hearts. What does that mean? With our good and our bad hearts. I.e., our Yetzer Tov and Yetzer Ra. Our good inclination and evil inclination. We have to love God with our good inclination. That makes a lot of sense. We have to love God with our evil inclination. Isn't the whole purpose of the evil inclination to make us not love God or not do what God wants or not follow the path of the Torah?
But that's our goal, is to get it to,
Then we wouldn't
is to make
fear
that
him.
correct it so it doesn't do that. So that we control the Yetzer Hara.
So that so how does that work?
Well, by overcoming the issue of sin or whatever that leads to that.
So you're saying if you give your Yetzer Hara such a beat down, you'll beat him into submission. Is that what you're saying?
No. You make everything that you do to be for God. Right? So even you overcome the sin that Yetzer Hara challenges you with.
Okay.
And by overcoming it, it's not a beat down, you're overcoming that, so therefore you become stronger in that.
So you're not loving God with your Yetzer Hara. Rather, in the role of the Yetzer Hara plays, you love God by not listening to it.
Yeah.
I think it's a very simple understanding.
Focusing.
You direct it.
Yeah.
How do you do that?
Well, like in one of the things that we studied where they asked, oh, take away our promiscuity, part of your Yitzhak, right? And then the chicken said, hey, eggs and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, no, we need that. So you
So channel it.
channel it towards God.
So these are two fantastic answers. Either that we say that, you love God, doesn't mean that you love God with your evil inclination. It means with the battles that you have with the inclination, you'll demonstrate your love for God by resisting. Or that there's actually a way, what Ben's saying, there's actually a way to take the Yetzer Hara and make that force, right, use that force for good. So like, for example, if somebody gets angry. Is angry a good thing or a bad thing?
A bad thing.
The bad thing, you would say, you think, right?
There's righteous anger.
Okay.
Well,
Going
there's
against sin. If somebody's sinning, you have to have a righteous anger towards that sin. Like they should.
So you're saying you're harnessing or you're harnessing or directing or channeling something that could potentially be bad as most oftentimes linked with the Yetzer Hara, and you're going to do it for a good purpose. Like if you
Right.
hate, evil, right? If you hate injustice, and you direct your anger and your wrath at injustice.
I don't recall if it's a midrash or Pirkei Avot, perhaps, that anger is equivalent to lack of faith of God.
Yeah, well, the Talmud says that whoever gets angry, it's as if they worship idolatry.
So, kind of like Batman.
Yeah, or well, I never watched any Batman movies, but
Interesting.
or what? I never watched that. Or
No.
just
That he would equate it to Batman.
why is that? Because Batman he tries to do good, right? He's a superhero.
Well,
Uses anger.
But does he use bad? Like he uses, I guess, violence against bad people. Violence is probably on its own in a vacuum is bad.
Burning rage kind of thing going for him.
Yeah, so that would be a good example. There's a Gemara, a crazy Gemara that says that it's Gemara in Yoma, the book that talks about Yom Kippur. The Gemara says that any Talmud Chacham, any Torah scholar that does not avenge any Torah scholar that does not avenge like a snake is not a Torah scholar. If you're a Torah scholar, but you don't avenge, you have no, you don't take revenge like a snake, you're not a Torah scholar. What does that mean? Revenge is one of the worst things. The answer is because in its proper context, it's actually a very good thing. And thus, every negative quality that we have in its proper context may be a mitzvah. For example, there's a Zohar, the only Zohar that I know,
Only one.
There's only one that I know. The Zohar says that if people did not have a sexual desire, they would have no fun studying Torah. Those two things don't seem to have much overlap. But the answer is that if you walk into a yeshiva, you see a lot of like unbridled passion. And at the core, that passion can be directed in several different ways. And if you actually isolate the passion and not in how it's being applied, that may look very much like the same sexual passion that people have. And thus, in directed towards Torah, well, that gives the Torah study that tremendous appeal. So perhaps, if we were talking about tackling our temptation, and that was on our docket, to talk about tackling temptation, well, how do you tackle temptation? Well, maybe there's a few different ways to do it. There's the way you described, to give it a beat down, and just beat it into submission, or ridicule it, so to speak. And there's a Gemara that talks about how the great tzaddikim, they would ridicule and belittle and kind of fight it head on. And then there's this other discussion of taking it and using it for good. And I think I might have mentioned this I did mention this in a previous class, that the Talmud says that when someone has the Yetzer Ra, when someone has the evil inclination coming after it, you drag it to the house of study. You remember we mentioned that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, we thought you shouldn't drag it, you should just abandon it and run away. Well, no, you drag it by channeling it. Additionally, I want to share with you guys another insight. Perhaps that this is another way to understand it. And that is, we find in the Talmud, back to the Talmud, this is in the book of Baba Basra. Baba Basra is the book that deals primarily with laws of property law. So I own the property when you own next door, and you decide that you want to open up use it for a purpose that's going to infringe upon my property. Or I sell you property, and then you claim, I come and I say, it's in the end sell to you. How do you prove it? Documentation and proofs and squatting and all that kind of stuff. And inheritance, bequeathing it, and what if we're partners and we decide to split off, or we're partners and we're neighbors and we build a fence together and the fence falls down, and what do you do with who has to rebuild, and who's forced, who could compel who to do what?
Birthright.
Can I,
Firstborn birthright?
Yeah, well, it discusses that as well. Can I build make a window and look, and ogle at you while you're in your swimming pool or not? All these interesting stuff, and with the laws of property with regards to neighbors and stuff like that. Either way, it has a whole discussion about charity in the middle. And in it says that if there's someone who says, I'm going to give a sela is a denomination of some coinage at the time. I'm going to give a sela to tzedakah, to charity, with the merit that by giving the tzedakah, with giving the charity, my child will become healthy. Someone has an ill child, they want the child to get healthy, and they say, you know what, I'm giving charity, but only that in merit of the charity, my child will get healthy. So the Gemara says, behold, that person is completely righteous. The question is, okay, it's nice to give charity, but wouldn't someone who's completely righteous be someone who gives charity, no strings attached? Isn't it even better to say I'm giving charity and I'm doing it for altruistic reasons. I'm doing it for because God told me to give charity. I'm not doing it because I'll get something out of it in the back end. You would think what would be a high level of charity in your eyes? The highest level of charity is to do it to not expect to get anything back. If I say, I'll give the charity, but I'll get a raffle ticket from it. I'm only going to give charity because I may win the sweepstakes. And but it doesn't seem that this is the highest level of piety. So the answer is, very interestingly, it's digging deep into the psyche or into the conflict that dominates our lives. Your soul wants nothing more than to give charity. Your Yetzer Tov wants nothing more than to give charity. However, you have two enormous impediments in your path towards giving charity. Right? Number one is your body. Number two is your Yetzer Ra. And they want to be as tight-fisted as possible and not give. And that is a classic conflict that we have every day in our lives. Our soul is pulling us one way. Our body, which is much stronger, pulls us the other way. And we're stuck in the middle. We've got to make choices. Now, if our interests were aligned, if all factors in our lives were pointing towards one direction, well, life would be very simple. The fact that our interests are not aligned, that creates the conflict. So if we could find a way to make our body and our Yetzer Ra, evil inclination, want what our soul wants, well, then we can accomplish everything in life. All we have to do is the silver bullet, or the magic bullet, I think it has bad connotations, but the silver bullet for success in life is to find some sort of way to make that all the interests, all the parties that are controlling what I feel, what I want to do in my life, all of them are pointing towards good. Well, how do you do that? You know what you do? You make that their interests are achieved with their agenda, so to speak, is addressed as well. Thus, someone's body, right? People, their body, so to speak, they love their child, and they don't need to, you don't have to have your soul to love your child. Right? That's something that's more emotional, more linked to the body. So the body wants the child and wants the well-being of the child. That's paramount for the body. The soul wants to give charity. So the genius, right, or the perfectly pious person is someone who knows how to get both sides of his of his humanity to agree to do the mitzvah. And how do you do that? By saying, I'm giving charity so that my child becomes healthy. And thus the body is like, okay, if God forbid someone has a child that's not well, then the body is very happy to shell out cash for that. Right? You'll pay anything to save your child, right? The body has no problem doing that. So this guy convinced his body and his Yetzer Ra to do what's a mitzvah. That is an act of total piety. Total piety is when someone navigates the conflict, the maelstrom. That's the right word. Maelstrom, I think, is pronounced. Right? Who do you guys have no idea? It's like, oh, whatever, either way. But to navigate the chaos that exists because we have conflicting interests, and to come to this unified behavior, that's a mitzvah.
But in that case, it's not the worst case scenario. I mean, the Yetzer Hara will be stronger if you say, I give tzedakah so that if I'm sick, I heal. You're now giving tzedakah to a third party. So you are kind of channeling
for the child?
For the child. It's yours, but it's not you.
Well, I think people...
It's less self-interest than
I
if it
think...
was
I
you.
don't agree with you. I'm saying as a parent. I don't think... You don't think that people care for their kids more than they care for themselves? I think that's a fair argument.
Most.
Let's take a vote of the parents.
But yeah, if you read the news, then...
I don't know, maybe it's, maybe... Some do, yeah. Some do, some don't, probably. But I think it's a good point. But either way, it's still an example, according to everyone, it's an example of kind of this alignment of interests.
And the Yetzer Hara typically would choose yourself than even your kids, right?
I don't know.
Why not?
Because it's more because the body really likes their kids. It's interesting. Like they point out that animals have the same interest in the well-being of their children than humans.
Some of them. Some of them. Yeah, some of them. Some people, some hamsters eat their thing.
Right, because they're wired to do something. But it's a phenomenon that we see very often in nature, and in fact, there's sources like Jewish sources that are really, really old to talk about this phenomenon, and the reason why is because it's not necessarily soulful. The fact that you have compassion and love for your child is not necessarily because you have a soul; it's because you have a body, or maybe you have a nefesh. And that is the emotion, the emotional attachment that a parent has to the child is not necessarily a result of them being a soul. Either way, I think that if this is the meaning behind, I think all of what we have proposed right now is very valid. But we're saying this is like the first thing that we're saying after the Shema, Perhaps because it is the way to really live the life that we can and we ought to. Right? To try to find this unity of purpose, to try to live this great life that we have everything, really. We have the physical, we have the spiritual. Everyone's happy. Right? However, it takes a lot of planning and a lot of analysis, and a lot of sacrifice as well. But it's possible to have it all. And, I'll give you some other examples of this. Like, we find Isaac, one of the momentous events in his life, perhaps the event that is described in most detail of his life is the fact that he wants to give a blessing to his son. Originally, he wants to give it to Esau. He ends up giving it to Jacob. Everyone remembers that story in Genesis? Mm-hmm. So what happens? He says to him, I want to give you a blessing. I want to give you a blessing, but you know what I need? I need 2 freshly slaughtered animals. I need massive steaks. And that's what I'm going to prepare.
He was from Texas.
I don't think so. He actually never left Israel.
That's true.
And the question is, if you had to think of a way to achieve, I want to really get to the level of prophecy. What would I do? You would say, first you go to the best restaurant, and you order everything in the menu, and you fress and fress and fress. When you're done fressing, you'll reach prophecy. Is that really how you reach prophecy? The answer is that when someone's soul wants to soar to such a degree that the prophecy is possible, you're going to have some resistance in the form of your body. You will have to assuage the interests of your body, kind of throw the proverbial bone to your body to make sure that they're on board as well. So in this clash of body and soul, I think there is merit, to what Tom described, and that is to just give it a beat down. But there's also this other idea where you could try to find some fusion, some unity, some point of agreement that everyone's happy. It doesn't have to be necessarily a fight. I'll give you guys another example. We talk about Shabbat, right? So Shabbat in my house, it's amazing. It's awesome. Where everyone's excited. We sing. Everyone gets dressed up. It's delightful. It's wonderful. Or at least that's what I'm trying to. That's the kind of atmosphere I'm trying to impart to my kids. Why? Because it's very good to have a positive association with the mitzvah. A parent could say, this is the way it is, and you're going to go to Sunday school whether you like it or not. Well, what happens then? They'll go to Sunday school, and they'll be miserable, and they have bad associations with it, and they can't wait until they finally have the bar mitzvah when they're out. And unfortunately, that's very common. We have to make sure that our Judaism, our religion that we're giving to our kids, is one that's appealing to them, it's exciting to them. Find some way to make Judaism fun. Make it exciting. And there's so much wonderful, just physical, so to speak, or emotional pleasure that we can have in our Judaism. And we kind of feel like, and this is, the weird kind of man's drive to asceticism, right? We have this bizarre need to, we feel really good when we're miserable. When we're justified in our misery. We feel like we're dedicating ourselves when we don't feel good. So if, for example, we feel like on Yom Kippur, I'm suffering because I'm really hungry, but this is spiritual because I'm suffering. Yeah, that's okay. When someone suffers for a mitzvah, that's wonderful. But how much greater is it when someone is delighted in it with a mitzvah? On Yom Kippur, you're delighted the fact that you're able to fast and do this wonderful mitzvah. But especially with children don't respond to spiritual cues as much as physical cues. So if their association with their Judaism is going to be the fact that all the things that they cannot do, or all the things that are highlighted are the things that they don't find appealing, then you know what? What's their association with Judaism going to be? Unappealing. And that's very unfortunate. And we have this whole process. Let's invite someone to the Seder that we don't usually invite. Who's that? The Yetzer Ra. And we're like, wait a minute, he's not supposed to have a place at the table. Well, maybe he is. Huh?
Is that me? Don't usually invite me, do you?
Maybe. We gotta talk. I haven't made plans yet.
I'm on the list of the open, free.
Extra ice cream?
Ice cream?
We have lots of matzah, I know that. No, this past year we were in New York for Pesach.
Wait, there was
Never again.
corrosive ice cream for Passover?
Oh, there's a lot of every year. There's the number of kosher Passover items doubles every year.
That's one tradition we break.
It's like Moore's law.
On Friday night, so that we can enjoy the ice cream we brought.
Moore's law. I just said there's a Moore's law for Pesach for kosher for Passover. Every 18 months, the amount of items that are kosher for Passover doubles. Nice. Either way, that's I think some really interesting and very perhaps useful thoughts that we have. Just the very first words. Now, what about we have to love God with all our soul? What does that mean? How do you love God with your soul? You would think your soul already loves God. What does it even mean to love God with your soul? We don't even feel our soul. How do we direct our soul to love God?
Yeah, but Israel needs to struggle.
Huh?
To struggle? I don't know.
But our soul, the truth is that the word for soul in Hebrew is neshama. This is whole nafshecha. It's a nefesh. It's something else. It really means our life. We have to love God with all our life. And what does that mean? It means that even if God takes away our life, we're okay with that. We're totally submitted to God, even if it means giving up our lives. Now, this is already a little bit, you guys say, whoa. This is a little bit much, right? Because to us, and quite naturally, we feel like the most important thing is self-preservation. Yet, the verse is saying that if there comes a conflict between your life and your love of God, the verse says you have to love God even if it means giving up your life.
Well, God made our lives, so don't we owe him one?
Well, it's not ours even. But we don't feel that. So I want to share with you guys an incredible Gemara that says as follows. It's talking about Rabbi Akiva, and it's during the Shemad. The Shemad is what happened in the beginning, the 20s and 30s of the 2nd century, so 120 and 130 of the Common Era. So we're talking about 50 years essentially after the temple's destroyed. And conditions for the Jews in Israel got very, very bad very fast. There was a fellow by the name of Hadrian, and he established very, very restrictive laws against Jewish practice. One of the things that he did is that he declared and decreed that if anyone studies Torah publicly, they will get executed. And there's a wonderful narrative here about Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva he didn't stop teaching Torah. He's teaching publicly. His yeshiva is still open. So this guy comes over to Rabbi Akiva and says, listen, they're going to kill you. They're going to kill you. So he tells him this wonderful mashal, this wonderful analogy. I mentioned this when we talk about why we study Torah. And he says to him, imagine you had a bunch of fish that are hiding around in the water, and the fox comes to him and says, hey, why are you hiding in the water? He says, well, there's other big fish coming to eat us. He says, okay, just come into the land, you're safe. No problem. Come into the land, you're safe. He says, well, in land we're for sure dead. Here we don't know if we're dead. Maybe we're not dead. So says the Rabbi Akiva to this fellow, he says to him, oh, the Torah for us is our life blood. We leave the proverbial water, and then we're dead for sure. If we're in the water, maybe we'll be dead, maybe we won't be dead. Either way, what happened a few days later, they captured Rabbi Akiva, they imprisoned him.
Torture him.
We'll get to the torture in a second.
They
And
skinned him.
Did they skin him?
They skinned him.
Yeah, skin.
we'll get to that in a second, guys.
Your favorite part.
And as he is being tortured and executed, which is they flayed him. It's a really, really bad way to go. He was saying the Shema.
He was happy.
Oh, and he was delighted. Why? And his students said to him, he says, really? Now is when you're saying the Shema? So they said that. So it's like, now of all things, like of all times, now is when he's saying the Shema. So he said to them as follows: my entire life, when I read this first verse in the Torah, of the Vahavta, I was miserable. My entire life. Why? Because I was yearning for the opportunity to fulfill this mitzvah. I was never able to fulfill this mitzvah. And now, the mitzvah is here. I'm not going to say the Shema. And he essentially passed away in the middle of the Shema.
So he didn't finish it?
Well, he said the first verse of the Shema, and that's when he passed away. Now, to me, I always thought that, listen, if there comes a point in time where we have to give up our life for God, okay, we'll do it. But that is perhaps suboptimal. Ideally, we'd like to kind of live a really long and fruitful life. If we're forced to, if someone says, hey, bow down to this idol or else I shoot you. Right? So we have to bite the bullet. It's unfortunate. That's what we would think. Here, Rabbi Akiva is saying his whole life he was miserable because he didn't have this opportunity. To me, that was a shocker. The thought that there's an ideal of it's an opportunity that he can't wait to be able to achieve. And I was thinking that maybe what it means is it's a certain dedication. It means your entire life comes down to what you're willing to die for. What you hold the most dear in your life is that you're willing to die for. Now, it might mean some project that you're doing, that if it's in the fire, you'll run back into the fire, endanger your life to save the project. That is what you're living for. That's your highest ideal because you're willing to die for it. I would say for a lot of people, it will be their kids. If their kids are, God forbid, in a burning house, you run back in. Well, what if you die? Okay, so that's what you're willing to die for this. Why? Because this is the most important ideal in your life. If God is the most important ideal in our lives, then we should be willing to die for it, for Him.
It is interesting that the things that you want to die for are the things that you want to live for.
Yes. Now, is it easier to die for a cause or live for a cause?
It depends on how you live and how you die.
No. I have a quote from my great grandfather. You say, well, who's your great grandfather? Why should you listen to him? He's one of the preeminent rabbinic authorities in Lithuania. Lithuania is the epicenter of Jewish scholarship and the yeshiva world, obviously before the war. He's one of the big names. And he wrote as follows. He said that it's much easier to jump in the fire, so to speak, to have the moment of inspiration to die for a cause, than every day, right, live for the cause, to trudge through your life for a cause. It's a lot easier to be engulfed in the inspiration. Mm-hmm. But either way, we declare here that we want to dedicate our lives to God, even if it means giving up our lives. And Rabbi Akiva is to such a degree that to him, he's like desiring this, as if this could be the ultimate fulfillment of a life well lived, is a life where it was demonstrated tangibly that you live for God. How so? By dying for God.
But your great-grandfather would disagree with Rabbi Akiva, right? He would say, no, it's more difficult. It's more meritorious.
Oh, yeah, for sure it's more difficult, as we know.
To live for God and fulfill His mission,
Absolutely.
than to die for Him.
True. And my great-grandfather, by the way, he died for God as well in the Holocaust. He did Kiddush Hashem. He was killed because he was Jewish.
Where?
He was
He
killed.
was in a camp?
No, he was in a hospital. I don't know exactly where the hospital was, but in 1944, the Germans just burned down the whole hospital while everyone knew it. Unbelievable. The 22nd of Tammuz.
When they were, what was it, the second temple that they burned? That
And
rabbis were jumping
yeah, well,
on
that's
the...
what Josephus writes, that all the Jews were jumping in the fire. You let us go down with the temple. So I do agree that that's an interesting point. But Rabbi Akiva, of course, lived his life for that as well. And he even says it. He even says, my whole life I'm waiting for this. My whole life was a life of living for the cause and as manifest by giving up my life for the cause, for that.
Yeah, I won't judge Rabbi Akiva.
Was there a question there? No more questions there. So let's go a little further here.
Why
Well,
I see
because
soul.
the Mishnah says, what does it mean, B'chol nafshcha, afilu notilis nafshcha? The Mishnah defines it as with all your nefesh. The word nefesh is not neshama, it's a little bit of a different word. And nefesh means kind of your life.
And why doesn't it say like souls or lives? Like Shabbos? Isn't there?
An extra soul?
Yes.
Well, that's an extra neshama, not an extra nefesh. Interesting. What does that even mean, by the way, to have an extra soul in Shabbos? Do you know what it means?
Well, that
You receive this extra spirituality during Shabbos.
Is that right?
That is,
That's what you would think, right?
that's the.
How does Rashi
But-
define the neshama yisera? This to me is like such a repudiation of what I had thought. Rashi, the great commentator, defines neshama yisera, the extra soul that we have on Shabbos, right? That the fact that we're able to eat tons of food and not get sick, not get nauseated.
Oh, so lucky.
So you have an extra
So we have
stomach.
this bottomless stomach on Shabbos.
Yeah.
This ultimate.
That doesn't sound very spiritual at all,
No.
don't you think? So what does that even mean? Like, what do we? Neshama is clearly something spiritual. We have extra neshama, so we should have extra spirituality, and that means that we could just go to the buffet and all you can eat and just engorge ourselves and not get sick, not want to puke.
Probably he's not
Good
talking about
question.
real food.
Huh?
He's not talking about real food.
Maybe he is. I think he is.
Is he?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure. I have a way to explain it. Of how does eating lots of food, how does that in any way equate to spirituality? Especially because it's labeled as an extra neshama. That's clearly referring to something spiritual. I have a way to answer to that.
elevating the food to spirituality.
Are you more
balanced on
Huh? What do you say?
I said, are you more balanced on Shabbos?
Well, balance in your diet, is that what you're saying?
No.
Body and soul?
Kind of.
I think
Well, I
it's
mean,
the
the,
other.
No, what?
no, please.
You're supposed to enjoy it, but you're also supposed to. Like, it's not just you who's supposed to enjoy it, you're supposed to enjoy it with others in a way that, let me, words.
It's also supposed to be like the best meal of the week. It's supposed to be on Shabbos.
Yeah, like the Gemara says some interesting things about Shabbos. It says, Shabbos, you have, the rabbis say, if you go and you find a piece of meat on Sunday, they say you buy it and say, this is for Shabbos. And then if you happen to buy meat in the store on Monday and you find something better, you buy that one and you swap out the other one. And you keep on, everything you say, this is for Shabbos. That's one source. Another source talks about the special foods of Shabbos. It seems like Shabbos, this whole spiritual day, Shabbos Kodesh, we even say, the holy Shabbos, and it's manifested in food, which is very bizarre.
Which is very Jewish.
They tried to kill us to dinner. Let's eat. So, my theory to answer this question is that Shabbos is a crossover mitzvah. Shabbos is a crossover mitzvah. How so? Shabbos is a mitzvah that a lot of the very activities that we do on Shabbos are things that our body is very happy with as well. Like remember, we're told in the Talmud, right, go buy yourself the best food you could possibly get for Shabbos. Well, the best food, that's something physical. Why is it buying food for like Shabbos? Should be a day that we sit there and we contemplate and we study Torah. We have a little food, whatever, just to cover our needs. Why are we suddenly focusing so much on our on our physical?
Awesomeness, celebration.
Thank you, Rabbi.
So I was thinking that maybe the quality of Shabbos is the fact that it's the experience, the spiritual experience is we could feel it physically. Means I'll give you guys an example. Normally, if I shake a lulav, everyone's sure shook a lulav before? Right? You have basically a branch, a bunch of small branches, and a lemon. Don't call it a citron, it's a lemon. An etrog. That's what it is, and that's what it feels like, and we're shaking it, and we feel a little weird. And we ask ourselves, why did I pay $150 for this set? And you know why we don't feel it? Because it's an entirely spiritual feeling. Thus, your body feels absolutely nothing. We eat matzah, we're chewing crackers. We're not experiencing the ecstasy. And that's really the problem with mitzvahs. We don't feel that we have nothing. We have no way to internalize, to sense what's actually going on, because we don't sense what our soul senses. We don't feel like what our soul feels. It's like the guy who loses his taste buds. It's a good example. Someone who loses his entire taste buds. So what do they eat? They eat whatever's cheapest. Or straws. Actually, they should chew grass. And then you give them a sizzling steak, medium rare, perfect, and they're chewing it as if it's sand, as if it's gravel, as if it's soil. It's straw, exactly. And they're chewing it, and to them it's like nothing, and everyone else at the table is like has their saliva just dripping down, right? And this person is just, that's what we're like in this world. We have zero taste buds for spirituality. And that's why for us, the mitzvahs seem dry. We're chewing gravel. We don't see nuance in mitzvah. We don't have the feeling and the insight. We're not drooling for mitzvahs. Shabbos is a crossover. The idea of holiness is where the physical and the spiritual meet. Shabbos is a crossover. Thus, we feel the mitzvah. The mitzvah is presented in a way that it's delicious food. A body feels that. A body starts saliva. If you want to have a little bit of an insight to what experience does your soul go through when you do a mitzvah, the same feeling that your body goes through when you experience Shabbos. That's what it's like. You can finally taste the mitzvah. For once, one day a week, you could taste the mitzvah, what it's like. You get temporary taste buds on Shabbos. And that's why, you talk about an extra soul. It's an extra soul. And how does that manifest? We can eat tons of food. Why? Because on Shabbos, the food is the spiritual. We could feel it, we could sense it, we have the taste buds for mitzvahs on Shabbos, for the mitzvah of Shabbos. Very interesting insight. By the way, I'll tell you guys another thing. We find in the Talmud, it seems increasingly likely that we'll get to the bottom here, but
what a shock.
we find in the Talmud that there are three things that are a measure of the world to come. Me'ein olam haba. We might have mentioned this, right? One of them is Shabbat. Shabbat is a measure of the world to come. I don't think we actually spoke about it in depth.
I'm the third one.
Right.
We spent some time on the third one.
All right.
So, and the first thing that's a measure of the world to come is Olam Haba. So if you want to know what Olam Haba is like, in a small way you can experience it in Shabbat. Now, what that is, I have at least four answers. What about Shabbat is akin, is a corollary to Olam Haba? There's at least four reasons, maybe even more. But one of the reasons is that for us in this world, in our current iteration, doing mitzvahs, doing spiritual activities, feel foreign. However, your soul, if you could feel your soul, if you were able to just kind of switch the emotions or the senses to be, if you had a mode that you could just switch to body to soul, and suddenly you feel what your soul feels, and you don't feel what your body feels, then a mitzvah, you would taste it, you would have nuance, you would have subtlety to the mitzvah. And you would covet it, you would desire it.
Would you need mitzvahs?
Well, it's like food. You would need it like food, just like your body needs food. It would be that fills you up.
If you're purely spiritual, no body.
You'll eat spiritual food.
Right, but there's no. Mitzvahs are to make the physical
Well,
spiritual.
what did we read a few weeks ago in the Parsha? We read a few weeks ago that man needs more than bread alone. You need the Word of God.
Yes.
The Word of God is the equivalent of bread. The Word of God for the soul is the equivalent of bread for the body.
What is a mitzvah that a soul will do without a body? Let's suppose all the souls are there, whatever.
Forget about doing a mitzvah. It means a spiritual activity, or a spiritual experience, or a spiritual agenda. Think about it that way. So think of a mitzvah, because it's hard to think of a mitzvah without a body.
Mitzvahs are for bodies, right? You need
True.
a body to do a mitzvah.
Right, but mitzvahs are spiritual activities for a body that's totally stymied as to why we're doing this. Befuddled.
Because we have a body, we have the mitzvah, right?
Oh, yeah. Because a mitzvah if we just had souls, then the soul wouldn't need to be molded.
Elevate, yeah.
Right, exactly. But either way, for the soul, it feels very natural to do a mitzvah. It feels something that makes a lot of sense. On Shabbat, we get a taste of what it's like Olam Haba. Olam Haba, the switch is turned to their body, and therefore the switch is turned to the body and into the soul, and therefore soulful activities feel very natural. On Shabbat is an example of that. We get the temporary taste buds. On Shabbat, the mitzvahs of Shabbat we experience, and we feel it very intimately, very naturally, very tangibly. Shabbat is the temporary taste buds. Good,
So
good
going back to
class
why does
name.
it say lives or souls? If
It does say it. That's what it says. It says
life.
nefesh. Life, nefesh.
Nefesh.
Nefesh
Like
means
hearts, you know.
nefesh means your life. That's what it means.
So is that
Which is one of the levels of soul, right? You have neshama, you have
Everything that's living has a
Something
nefesh. That's right.
Yeah.
Living in the way we define living.
So do you interpret that as your continuation of your soul? This world and the next? Like you were talking about earlier?
No, I wouldn't use the nefesh in that context. I would use the neshama in that context. Nefesh means your life, which is the binding of your body and soul. So typically, that's the term nefesh is the term for a human. Human is more than body or soul. It's the fusion of the two. So where the two meet is where your nefesh meets. Right. So if you remember, we talked about lashon hara, and lashon hara is a manifestation of humanity because speech, by definition, is half spiritual, half physical. It's this touch point between the two. And we said that when the verse says that God made a nefesh chaya, which means a living being, the way it's translated in the Onkelos is that God made a speaking being, because that's what it is. A human is a nefesh, fusion of soul and body, and therefore, if that is manifest in our speech, it seems very appropriate to translate it as such. How's everyone doing here? Did I lose the crowd yet? No?
No?
Okay, let's move on here.
what are you talking about?
I'm right here. So, how do you get love? How do you love God? How do we get there? How do we love God? We have a hard time even understanding God, even conceptualizing the idea of God.
Exactly.
Huh?
Right, exactly. Trying to understand God is part of loving God.
So you say if we understand God, we'll love God, but we have a hard time understanding God.
Well, the process.
Huh? What do you say? I'm sorry?
Almost thankful for things.
So if we're appreciative of God, then we'll... I like that. I think that would work.
I mean, when we say motzi, we're thanking him for
And if we really feel it, we'll be appreciative, like the laws of reciprocity. Right? Is that what you're saying? To reciprocate.
Kinda.
To respond in kind. Right? Someone does something good for you, you feel a feeling of indebtedness to them.
You have that feeling.
So we're saying that we have that towards God, because God does good for us.
We're never gonna repay it that way. That's just, we can't give God things. Only God can give us things.
True, but maybe the feeling is still
That's the
there.
repayment.
Yeah, the feeling.
Well, there's the other.
But it's not a payment, because we can't pay God.
Yeah,
We can't. And God's situation does not change whether we're good or bad, or whether we pray or we don't pray, or we do mitzvahs or we're not. Like, that doesn't change.
It's like maintaining a loving marriage. The feeling isn't always there. But you have to take proactive steps to keep that relationship.
So too. So what's the comparison?
Well, in your relationship with God, you can't just wait for this feeling of, oh, I love God, so now I can fulfill the
So you're saying that. So what are the proactive steps that you would do to?
So
My question is like this. You go ahead.
So I think there are different ways of interpreting our relation to God and how we love God. One is the image of a marriage. So we have a ketuvah, and each partner has a role, and then you love by fulfilling that role. So we said, yeah, we'll do and we'll listen, so we have to do it. Another one, showing love, is to fulfill His will. So when we try to understand Torah and do the mitzvot and so on, we are kind of doing our part
And
and showing love.
we'll love to such a degree that we're willing to give up our lives for it.
Rabbi Akiva would.
Well, what about us? Is this meaningless for us?
Well, I think probably a number of us would be willing to risk, in some sense.
Not risk. Give up your life. Bite the bullet. Gun is loaded. This is not Russian roulette. The gun is loaded. Right? Be
Well,
totally
we have
willing.
one bullet.
I think once you're in a situation, I guess it becomes easier to decide. But unless you're in that situation,
But how do you get to the point? We're not going to try to strive to Rabbi Akiva's level, but how do you get to the point of loving God even on a basic level? What steps do I do to improve? Someone mentioned to get to know God. Who said that? Someone said that. I don't remember who said that. To understand, if you understand God, then you love God. Well, how do you understand God? Well, why don't we understand God?
Well, first, we will never be able to understand God.
Okay,
So the process of trying to understand God, or what He wants to reveal to us, that's part of the loving relationship.
and therefore, she's saying, if we understand God, or to the degree that our understanding of God improves, that will reflect in love.
Yes. Now, there's this other thing.
It's like prioritizing your time to make it here, to have the opportunity to learn and to discuss like we are now. When you can choose to do other things. Like
So that
watch
would-
TV. That can be an act of love.
That's an act of love, but that's already after you have the love. How does it build the
Even
love?
if you don't feel, what if you feel like staying home and watching TV? But you make that conscious decision. I need to spend time learning more about God.
See, the act of sacrifice engenders
And
love.
it's not like I'm giving up my life. Nobody's pointing a gun at my head and saying make a choice. I'm just choosing to change my schedule and spend time learning about God.
Huh.
Because that's going to improve my relationship, and that's
So everyone seems to have in consensus to this idea that if we, or I'm saying this, the conversation is in consensus. I don't put words in everyone's mouth here. That if we understand God and we try to understand God, well, then that will reflect emotionally as well.
Well, that's
I
one.
think it's a very
aspect.
incredible idea. Like, this is a
wait,
novel idea.
But no, but it's not the only.
I agree with it entirely. By the way,
Some people and people have argued that doing chukim, it's even more important than doing those that you understand,
Yeah, right.
because you, without understanding,
Rational,
because you don't understand it and you still do it. It's
so
an act
therefore
of
it's an
love.
act of like dedication, so to speak, where you
Right.
suspend your own mind.
Yeah, and then you do it because that's what you're supposed to do. So I think my view of that answer is that it's multifaceted. It has like many things regarding different aspects of it. And one is the marriage relation. Another one is that appears all the time. It's the father-son-daughter relation. How does a son love a father?
How?
Yeah.
Well, it's primarily because of appreciation. The parents
So it's a
tended for them-
reciprocity thing. That kids typically don't
reciprocate.
You give.
yeah, you can't give back to God. 'cause
I mean,
don't
you
have it.
eventually,
Well,
You can't give
maybe.
maybe.
I'm waiting for that day. This idea that if you
Can't wait a long
long
time.
time, closer to
It's what I'm
God.
sorry.
Sit down.
If you keep the mitzvot, it brings you closer
It will bring about
to
love.
God. And then you understand, okay, well, why I'm doing this and that. Okay, I understand it. And you want to do it, and you do it. And one mitzvah will bring you to the next one. Because that's how it is. If you do good, it's only going to inspire you to do good. And then you get closer to Hashem through that.
Huh.
And through understanding.
These are all saying these incredible. I don't know if everyone realizes that, like, the enormity, the magnitude of what we're saying here. We're saying incredible ideas. We're saying that there's doing mitzvahs or getting closer to understanding God that will bring about love. I think these are incredible insights. And what I want to share with you guys is one of the great lines we'll have. Like one of the great processes that are described, and that's the Rambam, Maimonides. And Maimonides, he asked the same question we asked: how do you love God? How do you do it? Especially compounded by the fact that we don't even understand God. Our understanding is it's so rudimentary, it's so basic. It's just like not a vague definition. It's a definition, but it's a definition that precludes us from totally understanding it, by definition. So he says, quoting a Sifri, he says as follows. He says, the way you love God is by understanding God. So you guys hit the nail on the head. But not understanding God himself, rather than understanding what God gave us as proxies to understand God. I.e., let's say the Torah as an example. He says, the more you understand Torah, the more you have some sort of insight into God's mind, so to speak, and therefore the greater your understanding of God, and therefore the more love you'll have.
But you said Torah, for example. But it's Torah. It's not
Well,
for example,
no.
right?
He gives 3 examples.
Torah, what else? Torah,
Torah.
both,
No,
right?
Torah, science, God's handiwork, what God did. You see the complexity. You see everything works so nicely. You see the Torah. You see the complexity. You see things work so nicely. Or the mitzvahs. Right? If you really understand the mitzvahs,
Right, that's
and that's God's
understanding Torah.
commandments.
That's understanding Torah. Right?
Well, yes, but Torah can mean very theoretical as well. Mitzvah means a mitzvah that you do. To see how a commandment and how the commandment is designed in a way to perfect humanity, and how the commandments in their entirety are so perfectly designed as the exact 613 commandments to make someone great, and how it tends to different elements. And you mentioned the chutim and all that stuff. Right? There's enormous, infinite complexity in all these 3 elements. And there are 3 different ways to approach it, because these are 3 things that God gave us. God could have given us a very simple, you don't have to have the double helix structure. God could have made humanity without cells, without breaking it down to a more granular subatomic level. But he did it in this way as a means for us to gain some sort of insight into the idea of infinity. When we things that we translate as being infinitely complex and infinitely wondersome and just so marvelous, that gives us an insight as to the nature of the Creator in the form of Torah or science or the mitzvahs. Thus, indeed, God himself will have a very hard time actually feeling the understanding in a tangible way. But the Torah was given to us as a means to, by proxy, understand God. The science, right? When I say science, I mean God's handiwork. So that can mean in a variety of things. Biology, it can mean how the systems with the astrology, not astrology, astronomy. Sorry, astrology is something else. Astrology with the cooch, right? I get mixed up with the astrology and astronomy.
Scientology.
And biology and just the earth
all the
sciences, all the sciences, right? Physics as well, of course.
So,
and that is a way for us to gain an insight as to how complex our world is, and we extrapolate that to realize just how incredible the idea of an infinite creator is. Now, go ahead.
So Maimonides always likes to give percentages of. Does he give a percentage of how much of science you should know, how much Torah you should know?
Well, I think he says either you could choose either one of these paths with regards to this mitzvah. It means with regards to the mitzvah of loving God, there's 3 paths that you could choose. Well, there's one process in 3 different areas of study. And the process is as follows. He describes the process as well. He says, number 1, you think in some area. Number 2, you contemplate, which means very deep thinking. Number 3, you have an insight. You hit pay dirt. You have an aha moment when you get it. And then it's pleasure, the idea of pleasure. The idea where the emotion sweeps over you. Those 4 steps. And that makes you love God.
So where is this? Guide? It's in the guide or where is this? This 4
Go ahead.
steps?
It's not the guide, it's not the An Chazak. Go ahead. Where else is it? Not the Mishnah Torah. It's not the Pirush Mishnayos. It's not the commentary of the Mishnah. It's not on the letters to Yemen or the letters to the Chachmei Lunil. It's not in any one of the treatises that he wrote. Where is it? So the Rambam wrote a lot of different things. Like I said, I don't know if you mentioned this before, but I have a whole class, by the way, a biographical sketch of the Rambam, what his role was. Very fascinating stuff. Maybe we'll do it one time here. It's so interesting.
Did you see his grave?
Yeah,
did
it's
you
very
visit
cool.
it?
Yes, I did. It's incredible.
Sorry.
So he had a problem that scholars have had for thousands of years, or at least, I don't know if they had the problem or they were bothered by the problem, as much as it was just not out there. And that is that we know how many mitzvahs are in the Torah. 613. How do we know that?
Because Tanit, my daughter, was born with 613. That was her weight. When she
What was her
born.
weight?
Yeah.
Or she wasn't born in June 13th? So everyone knows the 613. How do you know that? How did the Rambam know that?
Codified.
Because the Talmud says it. Right? The Talmud says it. What are the 613 mitzvahs? What is the exact breakdown of mitzvahs? Some mitzvahs are categories, really. Right? Doing kindness is a category. It means a lot of different things. So how do you know what's a category and what's a subcategory? And what's the breakdown exactly of the 613 mitzvahs and the 365 negative mitzvahs, 248 positive? Everyone knew that. The Rambam says, I'll write a book for you that's called the Book of the Mitzvahs. And I'll start counting 248 mitzvah 1, mitzvah 2, mitzvah 3, mitzvah 4. And by the way, you know what? I'll do it in order of importance as
And
well.
a few classes ago, I asked you a question.
It's not in order of importance.
Yes, it is.
Well, a few classes ago, I asked you a question.
Where's the source? That's in order of importance.
I know you've had this problem with me before.
Yes.
It's clearly in order of importance. When he starts off with the first mitzvah is believe in God. The second mitzvah is God is one. And the third
that's
mitzvah,
the most obvious. You know.
it's heavily implied. I don't know if it's you like sources. Either way,
Is that the one
But when you-
Art Scroll is remaking?
It sounds
The
more
Book of
like
Mitzvahs?
Art Scroll is doing a mitzvah. But no, Art Scroll is doing a book of mitzvahs that was written
Like 8
200 years after the Rambam wrote it. But that's based upon the Rambam.
Okay, yeah, that's what I'm saying. Is it based on that?
Means that book, the book of the chinuch, the book of the education, that book he just copied Maimonides' 613 mitzvahs. And he wrote a book on those 613 mitzvahs. But what is a mitzvah, what's not a mitzvah, he used Maimonides' lists.
So, wait.
Which is just for the scope of scholarship. Imagine I told you here's the Torah, here's all the Talmud, here's all the Midrash, here's all the Sefer Michal Torah from all the Jewish sources. I want you to tell me what are the mitzvahs and what are not. So you'll probably count, if you count the Torah, you'll count thousands of mitzvahs. Right? Because you have no idea what is actually a category and what is a subcategory. The 613 mitzvahs are 613 categories of mitzvahs. So what is, like for example, is it a mitzvah to get married or not?
Is it what?
A mitzvah to get married or not? We know it's a mitzvah to have children. Is it a mitzvah to get married or not?
Yeah, it's a minute.
Is it a mitzvah? I don't know, you tell me. Huh? Yeah, so maybe it's not a mitzvah, it's just, let's say, what's called a hechsher mitzvah. It's an enabling mitzvah. So that, the Rambam, Maimonides, he's of the opinion that it's a mitzvah to get married. And all the other commentators, means after Maimonides opened the door of asking the question, what's a mitzvah, what's a general category, what's an enabling category, or what's a subcategory, people jumped at him and said, no, that's not a mitzvah, that's just an enabler. But he counts as one of the 613 mitzvahs. Tiyikach ish isha. It's a mitzvah to get married, and that's it. And he counts as one of the 613 mitzvahs. What are you saying?
So when you...
Huh?
you...
Sorry, doesn't it say you should leave your parents and join?
Therefore, man should leave his father and mother and leaves his wife, and right, and they become one flesh. Right. So is that a mitzvah or not? We have no clue where to start. Right. The first place to start is probably the way to know all of Talmud by heart, backwards and forwards, and have complete access to everything at once. And by the way, this is at the time where nothing's printed. So whatever you're reading is from whatever copy whatever handwritten copy your town has, if it has it, if it doesn't have it. So that's why it might be a good idea to commit it all to memory, just to simplify things.
We have Ben 2.0 for that. But so when you said this a few classes ago, you said this is the first one, this is the second one, and I asked you which one is the last one, the least important mitzvah.
And nothing you can say that it is the least important.
Well, you just said they were listed in order.
I think it's more in order.
So I want to know the last one.
of
Which one is the
what
least
enjoins
important?
the mitzvah, 'cause you said the
I have a
first
rant on
mitzvah
this, by the way. I have
was-
something to say. Sorry, you're saying.
Sorry.
I didn't mean to interrupt.
The first mitzvah contains all other 612 mitzvahs. So maybe it's not necessarily in order of importance.
It's clearly in order of importance.
It's
I don't know why I have to argue about this so much. It's clearly in order of importance, guys.
I'm okay with it.
My problem is that you didn't even heard of this book until 5 minutes ago, and now you're arguing with me about the
No, I'm not
Oh,
arguing
okay.
about the order of importance. I'm okay with that.
It's one of the mitzvahs. I don't know.
But is it in order
I'm
of
okay with that. I'm not-
Because that mitzvah contains
The red
the
heifer
rest.
was
The rest.
But how many separate mitzvahs are the red heifer? Is the process a mitzvah or not? Or is it a mitzvah at all? Maybe it's just a solution to a problem. If you have a problem, is it a mitzvah to slaughter an animal in a kosher fashion, or not?
You mean the oral Torah?
No, I'm saying is it a mitzvah?
No, probably not. It's an
Because
enabler. I mean,
listen, if you're hungry, you have to eat kosher food. But it's not a mitzvah to go and slaughter it, right?
But it's like
Is it or is it not?
But that's
Well,
following
it's-
the oral tradition. So if you're...
Oh yeah, I mean for sure there's
No,
a
yeah.
law of how you do it. The question is it a mitzvah or not?
well, it's like
Is
it's
it one of the 613 mitzvahs? What if someone's a vegetarian?
Say what it is.
If someone's a vegetarian, they cannot fulfill all the mitzvahs? Is that what you're trying to tell me? Okay, we would have no clue. We would have no clue how to actually do this, and no one did it till Maimonides did it.
But I mean, for example, blowing the shofar.
That's a mitzvah, clearly.
But hearing the shofar is the mitzvah.
Right. Well,
Not
yeah.
blowing.
Okay.
Blowing is
Hearing the shofar. That's right. That's right.
So blowing is enabling.
Yeah. Well,
element.
but the
If nobody
mitzvah,
blows it-
even the blessing for the mitzvah of blowing the shofar
Right,
is to
so
hear
somebody-
the shofar, the Shema
Yeah.
kol shofar.
So it's not blowing it. So blowing the shofar is not a mitzvah. But it's an enabler. It's a
No.
self-clear-
No. The mitzvah is hearing it.
It's
Even
hearing,
even the
yeah.
guy's blowing it is hearing it.
It's like the Megillah, right?
Yeah. But Megillah is a rabbinic mitzvah.
So what?
Megillah, reading the Megillah, that's one of the 7 rabbinic mitzvahs.
So you still have to tell me what the last one is. You'll
So
find it.
let me tell you my rant in this. So by the way, if you look at the Mishnah Torah, that's not a rant. It's just an insight, it's a clever insight. If you look at the Mishnah Torah, which by the way, I'm using words. Does anyone know what I'm talking about? We're talking about the different words of Maimonides. When someone says Maimonides writes, most often it'll be referred to, if it's philosophical in any way, it'll be referred to the Maimonides Guide to the Perplexed, which is an enormously impactful and controversial book that he wrote. But if it's talking about, one of the roles that he took upon himself was to organize all of Jewish law. Not only that, organize all of Jewish everything, from theology to philosophy to law to everything. And that he did in the book, in a set of 14 books, either called Yad HaChazaka or Mishnah Torah. It's 2 names for the same set of books. The word Yad, by the way, in Gematria is 14. So it's nice, there's 14 books, and it's called Yad HaChazaka. In it, he also works in conceptual order. Right? The first things of the foundations of the Torah, the first book is the book of knowledge, which deals with the 5 laws that are discussed are the laws of the foundation of the Torah, the laws of idolatry, which is the second mitzvah, right, of the 10 Commandments, laws of Torah study, the laws of character, like behavior, midos, and the laws of tshuva, repentance. Clearly, these are the biggies, or, these are crucial, very...
The 5th is called, what do you call it? What's the 5th book? The one we were doing?
The 5th book?
5th thing, 5th chapter, whatever.
Shuvot.
Oh, yeah, then he talks about prophecy.
Prophecy.
Yeah, well, that's in the first set of laws, the laws of the foundations of the Torah.
The first 4 is what you were just talking
The first 4 is theology, and
about.
then...
And then the 5 is...
That's right.
That's what you're talking about, okay.
Right. But that section is the first section. I just mentioned the first 5 sessions. Either way, the last thing that he mentions, the last set of laws, the last book
Messiah.
is called Melachim, which means kings. So that deals with like the laws of courts and establishing courts and running your government.
Mashiach.
And the second to last thing that he mentions, the second to last section he talks about is the laws of Gentiles. Second to last thing that he mentions is the laws of Gentiles. And these laws are for Gentiles, really. They're not laws that are applicable to Jews. And the last thing that he mentions is the laws of Messiah. Last 2 chapters, laws of Messiah. So I have quipped in the past that it's interesting that he's telling the Jews who are reading the book, that's the target audience, right? He's telling the Jews, for you, it's more important to know what Gentiles need to do than to learn about Messiah. And by the way, if you think I'm saying that on my own, several times in the laws of Messiah, in those 2 chapters, he tells you, he exhorts his reader to know that these things are not so important to study. And in fact, he writes something like, And a lot of these issues are not so clearly verified in the sources because they're not so important to know. And therefore, any analyses of what are the exact details of this law is fruitless. It's fruitless and it's silly to do, and you gain nothing from it. That's what he writes. And we believe that it's going to come, but when it comes, we'll find out more about it. That's what he writes. Maimonides writes, don't trust me, please don't, check it out. So,
Google it.
Google it, the law, Maimonides on Messiah. There's 2 chapters. It's chapter, I think, 10 and 11 of the laws of Malachim, of kings. And the book is called Shoftim, which means judges. So it's laws of kings. It's kings and wars. That's this last section. I think it's chapter 10, chapter 11. He tells you what Messiah is, and then he tells you, read it. Trust me, guys. Read it. Oh, don't trust me. Sorry. Don't trust me. I'm making it all up. Right? Disprove me. Right? That's what he says. Now, what I would point out, that is there a coincidence that Maimonides organized his book in a way that the thing that he writes more than anything else, that this is not important to know, and that he repeats that theme several times, is the last thing that he mentions. Is that a shocker? Or was it just randomly? You think Maimonides worked randomly? If you think so, then you have no idea about who we're talking about. If you think that in any way, in any capacity, he would just do something just by chance, coincidentally, it could be either way. let's just take it out of the hat. Okay, the laws of foundation of the Torah. Let's do that first. Let's pull the hat again.
What is the Torah mentioned over 3 times? It's the widow, or is it the non-Jew that you should be?
You should love.
Yes.
It's everyone. Love God and love the convert.
Stranger in your
Because you were a stranger. That's right.
Yeah.
Okay, but you're saying the non-Jew in this case is second to last.
No, I'm saying the laws of non-Jews, not the laws of non-Jews as written for Jews, which is obviously not very useful, right? When would you ever, if the Jew who's reading the book is like, when would this ever apply to me? Never. You know why? Because even if I get baptized, I might get wet, but I'll still stay Jewish, right? So it's really never pertinent for you. No matter how many times someone gets baptized, they'll still be Jewish. You could do 1,000 million sins, otherwise shortened as 1 billion sins. You'll still be Jewish. There's nothing you could do to not be Jewish. So it's I would say it's exceedingly irrelevant, right? But it's still part of the corpus of the Torah.
They can still get excommunicated.
Oh yeah, but you don't become non-Jewish. A lot of things can happen to you. You get executed in Jewish courts under certain circumstances. You're still Jewish. So that's I think enough evidence. I think the fact that it's organized in such a way that he wrote it in conceptual order. Either way, so Maimonides in Mitzvah 3 of the Book of Mitzvahs says the mitzvah number 3 is to love God. And he says, how do you love God? You think and you contemplate. Contemplate is not a good enough word, by the way. I say contemplate because it's the best word I came up with. It's think deeply, dwell, analyze, is break your head over either Torah, science, or mitzvahs until you have an insight and you have the highest level of pleasure. And by the way, the words that Maimonides used to describe the highest level of pleasure are the same words that he used to describe Olam Haba. What he's telling you is that it's possible to have the experience of Olam Haba in this world. Right? Because Olam Haba is having a soulful pleasure in the way the soul understands, i.e., in conceptualizing God. Well, you can do it as well in this world. It's just a lot harder in this world because you have to go through a lot to expose that part of who you are. But he says you can have the highest levels of pleasure possible. Well, did you actually get it?
No, the Shema is 1,118. That's
Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. Makes sense.
There's an 18 there, but
Okay, let's quickly read through here. We're not doing part 3, guys. Don't even think about it.
You haven't even got to read the second sentence.
Ooh, I can read it very fast. So let's go through it and we'll talk about the highlights of it. So we find, so let these matters that I commanded be upon your heart. Teach them thoroughly to your children and speak of them while you sit at your home, while you walk on the way, when you retire, and when you rise. That's why we say the Shema in the morning and at night. But we teach Torah. The teaching Torah to our children is continuity for Judaism. Maimonides writes that if there is a city, I think what he writes is if there's a city that doesn't have a Jewish school, the city is to be burned down. I think he was right. Or I don't know if he says you cannot live in such a city, or you can't live in such a city, or you have to burn it down or something crazy like that. Why? Because if there's no Jewish education for our kids, Judaism ends. It cannot possibly skip a generation. If you miss one generation, you're done.
Thank goodness we have Shalom Secret School.
That's right.
The first thing we created was the Hebrew school. Yeah.
Bind them as a sign upon your arm, and let them be filled between your eyes, and write them on the doorposts of your house and upon your gates. If you remember, we spoke last week about the Chafetz Chaim, the parable, the analogy that he gives, that there's this, that we're talking about this very complex factory that we're trying to organize, and the Shema is the repetition of the instructions, and we write them on the doors, and we bind them on our head. That's what that tefillin is. Tefillin is, I'm taking the Shema basically, and the lessons of the Shema, and I'm wrapping them to my body, to my brain, and to my heart every day. And the doorpost on every door, and reminds me of these ideas. Okay, now, in paragraph number 2, we kind of pivot into an entirely different. It has a very different feel to it. I'll see if you guys we can pick it up. It starts talking about, first of all the commandments here. And it will come to pass that if you continually hearken to my commandments that I command you today, to love Hashem your God and to serve Him with all your heart and with all your soul, then I will provide rain for your land in its proper time, the early and the late rains, that you may gather in your grain, your wine, and your oil. I will provide grass in your field for your cattle, and you will eat and be satisfied. So it says if you listen to the Torah, you'll have it good. You'll have the rain, you'll have the grain, you'll have the wine, the oil, you'll have the grass. You have it all. So what it's essentially describing here is reward and punishment. However, beware, the next verse, lest your heart be seduced and you turn astray and serve gods of others and bow to them. Then the wrath of Hashem will blaze against you. He will strain the heavens so that there will be no rain, and the ground will not yield its produce, and you will be swiftly banished from the goodly land which Hashem gives you. By the way, these things have all happened. We were swiftly banned from the land, as is predicted multiple times in the Torah. Place these words of mine upon your heart and upon your soul. Bind them for a sign upon your arm, and let them be filled between your eyes. What it's telling us is that the idea of reward and punishment is something so important that it's got to be included amongst those other things that we read in the Hafta. It's got to be in our doorpost, it's got to be in our tefillin, we've got to repeat it every day. And the question is why? I think it's like reward and punishment is something really nice. We're really glad to have reward and punishment, at least in the form of reward. Yet, why is it such a core element of Jewish life that it's part of the Shema? I'll tell you even more. By the way, our favorite sage of all time, Maimonides. All right, so he writes the 13 principles of faith. Where does he write that? Do you know?
Mm-hmm. Well, he gathers stuff. Well, it's a guide.
Huh?
In the guide.
It's not in the guide.
Again, we start again. Yep.
Huh?
Yep.
It's not in the Yad. It's not in the Yad, otherwise it was the Mishnah Torah. It's not in the book of mitzvahs. It's not the Sefer Mitzvot. And it's not in any of the letters that he wrote. It's in fact in the commentary of the Mishnah. It's the first work of Maimonides. Like, if Maimonides just wrote the commentary of the Mishnah, if he just wrote that,
Dayenu.
he would be a legend for all time. He would be an like that work on its own. That's 500 lifetimes of achievement.
He was very young, actually.
He published it when he was 24 years old.
Yeah.
By the way, and he's living for 9 years in caves, hiding from radical Muslims.
Mm-hmm.
That's what he's doing for those 9 years. The Almohads. He moved from his house, his family in Spain. They moved to Fez in Morocco because they were kicked out with the ultimatum: either you convert to Islam or we kill you. And they moved to Fez, and they ended up in the Atlas Mountains in northern Morocco because that was the only place to hide. And under those conditions, as a teenager, he writes a commentary on the entire Mishnah, all 63 books. And by the way, you say, oh, a commentary on the Mishnah, it's no big deal, right? He was the first to do it. In more than almost 1,000 years since the Mishnah was written, no one had succeeded in writing an entire commentary on the Mishnah. And Maimonides does it. And he does it as a teenager living in a cave, you know. It's unimaginable the scope of accomplishments that we're dealing with here. But he has an introduction on one of the chapters. Well, first of all, a lot of it I don't do too many spoilers here, because I want to give a class on Maimonides. I got inspired to talk about it, to give you guys a little biographical taste of who he was and what his roles were. But he writes in one of the introductions, he writes, I will organize for you, crystallize the 13 core principles of Judaism. And if you look at the last 4 of the 13 principles of faith, they all revolve around the idea of reward and punishment. One of them is God gives reward and punishment. One of them, God knows everything that we do. Right? Because if God doesn't know, then there can't be reward and punishment. One of them is Mashiach, and one of them is Tchiyat HaMeitim, reviving the dead, resurrection. 4 of them, 4 out of the 13. Obviously, there's something very crucial about reward and punishment that without it, we cannot have Judaism. It's so critical. No, what's so important about reward and punishment?
It surrounds around the idea of responsibility.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
If there's no sense of responsibility and so on, there's nothing around that. It's also related to free will, right? That you can choose between good and bad.
Okay, and very good. Let's finish the points. Let's say if there was no reward and punishment.
Mm-hmm.
If there was no reward and punishment, then what? What would we have?
The things that we do, they don't have consequences, are inconsequential, anything that we do.
That's right. That's absolutely right. You hit the nail on the head. I can't say it any better. I can't say it any better. Like, if there's no consequences, it's inconsequential. Like, essentially, our life only has purpose because success and failure is not guaranteed. If it was, then, like I said, there's no free will, but there's no purpose in life because we're just tracing along the lines that were already there. We're not even tracing it. We're doing nothing. Thus, our actions matter. Our life has purpose because our actions are in our hands. Thus, and therefore, there's reactions to those actions. There's repercussions, and it's kind of a joy because if we didn't have that, our actions would be meaningless. And the example that we give is that your child, when they act well, you give them the lollipop. When they misbehave, you give them the little zapta, as they say in Yiddish. No, we don't. But, a parent responds to the behavior of their child because a parent loves the child. God loves us. He wants us to have meaningful lives. Therefore, he responds to our actions. And by the way, he responds collectively as well, which is another curiosity of Jewish history, is that this idea of being part of a community, a unity of masses, and being treated as an element of a bigger picture. For the good and for the bad. In Yom Kippur we get judged
individually.
Hopefully not. We don't want to get judged in religion.
You are inscribed or not, right? You individually
True. But we try as much as we can to be part of the collective.
Correct.
Because otherwise, if we are scrutinized individually, most likely we will not succeed in passing the test. When we're part of the community, the collective, well, then there's certain special powers that the Jewish people have collectively that we latch onto, and therefore we benefit from that. But there's the converse of that is that, listen, obviously there's a very grave question if you have communal punishment, but it certainly exists in Jewish sources, and it absolutely exists in Jewish history. And people might point out that the vast majority of the Polish Jews that were almost entirely decimated in the Holocaust were very, very perhaps religious or observant, whatever word you want to use, very pious Jews, as opposed to the Jews, the German Jews or the French Jews. Those were the Jews that were very,
secular.
not someone would say secular, but anti-religious, or that whole era that existed at that time. The ones who wanted to assimilate all that. So they were this. So if the Holocaust is viewed, now this is obviously a very sensitive subject that I think we can discuss, but we have to designate time to discuss it in a sensitive way. But if the Holocaust is a fulfillment of what the Torah says, when the Torah describes Holocaust-like events, well, then maybe it should be relegated only to the people that deserve it, so to speak. That's a good question. But we're told not like that. We're told we're collectively, judged positively, negatively. And it's obviously a very hard thing to absorb. Why should someone be judged and have to suffer for their neighbor's misdeeds?
Well, you would expect, right? If there are 10, right? That's what Abraham, when he was pleading not to destroy the city, because if there are 100, there's 10.
Yeah.
So if there are 10 good Jews in Germany, you would expect it to be saved, right?
Huh. Is that what you're saying? Well,
There were no 10 Jews.
I would think that there were, but maybe we don't have that same flexibility. Maybe we're held to a higher standard. You can just say, 10 Jews. Because remember, the city of stone, this is before the Torah, there's no Jews.
Yeah, not Jews, the good Jews, not good Jews.
Right. But I'm saying it wasn't related to the Jewish religion.
Yeah,
So maybe they have a lower bar. All you need is a couple of pious people and you're good to go. Maybe the people have a much higher bar. It's a
well,
good
this
question.
is a whole discussion. We need
So
to
so we need to have to schedule something after that. Let's quickly finish reading here because I don't want to go too much over time here. Teach them to your children. We're on page 2. To discuss them while you sit in your home, while you walk on the way, when you retire, when you arise, and write them on the doorposts of your house and upon your gates. In order to prolong your days and the days of your children upon the ground that Hashem has sworn to your ancestors to give them, like the days of the heaven and earth. By the way, when the Talmud says that there are many sources in the Torah that talk about resurrection of the dead, one of the sources is what we just read. I'll read it again, see if you can pick it up here. In order to prolong your days, the days of your children upon the ground that Hashem has sworn to your ancestors to give them, like the days of the heaven and earth. On the earth. Where does it mention anything about dead people coming back to life? Does it mention it anywhere? This verse the Talmud used as proof that dead people come to life.
well, like days of the heaven on earth. But so I think
No, it's not the words that he uses.
My mom is.
It's not the words that he uses.
He has big discussions in this letter with I don't remember who was the letter that he wrote about people accusing him that he didn't believe of resurrection.
Yeah, so
And then after some time, he had to write it into the 13 Principles, saying, yes, this is what I believe. But
yeah, there was a lot of controversy.
yes,
Um,
so it's not
about that.
it's not clear whether he believed it from the get-go.
Oh, he clearly believed it. It's interesting. No, and everyone agreed, even his detractors. He was so. Maimonides was such an incredible figure, and he was something so entirely different than what we had seen. And he was so beyond what people weren't used to. It was so novel, so to speak, that someone could do all of this. That people some of them reacted very viscerally to it.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, it was really terrible because in the early 13th century, so Maimonides died in 1204. In 1230 or 1240, there was a big backlash against Maimonides, and they burned a bunch of his books. And then, at the same exact spot, there were 24 wagons full of Talmuds that were collected by the Gentiles and burned at the same spot. And all the Jews realized that the Jews themselves kind of bizarrely burned Maimonides' books. And at that very same location, the Gentiles burned 24 books of the Talmud, 24 wagons full. Which, by the way, you think of a wagon full. How many copies of Talmud could fit in a wagon? And how priceless was every single piece of the Talmud before printing presses. But that kind of shook the entire nation to its core, and people realized that it wasn't a coincidence that when they had, in such a public fashion, went against the Rambam, they were smacked back, kind of, so to speak, in the exact same location by having the Talmuds burned. But either way, the verse here says, in order to prolong your days and days of your children upon the ground that Hashem has sworn to your ancestors to give them. Which ground are we talking about? Which land are we talking about?
It's Canaan.
Land of Israel, that's right. Now, who did God swear to give the land to? To your ancestors. The ancestors didn't get it, they're dead. The ancestors are all dead. Clearly from this verse, this is proof that the Torah believes in resurrection. It's one of the Torah proofs of resurrection. How do you like that? You like it, huh? I see a quizzical look, at least one quizzical look.
So
At least one.
that look is for
Well, no. The lambs were to give to them and their descendants. But I'll bring you verses. The Torah says that God tells Abram, I'll give it to you. Isaac and Jacob, they all independently got promises that they will get the land. So you could say, well, they means their children, But it could have said, when Moses is speaking. So Moses should have said, right, Moses is being quoted here in the Torah. The Torah is really the one that's speaking. This is where the words come from, the Torah. But what it should have said is that upon the ground that Hashem has sworn to your ancestors to give to us. Ancestors are dead right now. So the idea of having kind of the meaning, the implied meaning being, when I give it to you, I'll give it to your kids, that shouldn't apply when they're already dead. So either way, that's one of the about 15 proofs that it's used. There's an enormous amount of proofs. This is just one of them. It's good to know. Okay, let's finish up here. And Hashem said to Moses, saying, speak to the children of Israel and say to them that they are to make tzitzis on the corners of the garment throughout the generations. That's these things, by the way. These are the tzitzis. And they are, I have someone, I know, I don't remember who, someone in the story that they met some guy on an airplane. These conversations always happen in airplanes. And the guy was saying, they were having some sort of theological discussion. And the Jew told him, I think it was a Jew and someone else. The Jew told him, like we observe the Torah, the Bible, the original way. Like, we haven't changed anything. He's like, really? Where are your fringes? The guy pulls his hands in his pockets and says, here they are. And it's like, it's been, we have stories about the tzitzis, and it's an uninterrupted tradition and mitzvah that we've had for forever, essentially, since the times of Moses. Moses is the one who tells us. God tells Moses to tell us to wear tzitzis. We're wearing the same tzitzis today.
So he was wearing tzitzit?
Of course they were wearing tzitzis, yeah.
How did they make them?
How did they make everything? How did they make any wool? How did they make all the vestments of the temple? How did they make them? They spun wool, the old-fashioned way. Now,
Isn't there a discrepancy on the colors?
no, the tchelas. We didn't get the tchelas yet. Tchelas we don't have. That's right. Tchelas we don't have. That's controversy.
And the dye that's made from, right?
Right, that's the tchelas.
And then snail or anything.
That's right. Now, there's a great story about the Gaon of Vilna, the genius of Vilna. By the way, if your moniker is the genius, and you're Jewish, like if the Jewish people collectively, for hundreds of years have labeled you as being a genius, that's what your name is. We're talking about another titanic figure in Jewish history in the 18th century. But there's a famous story of him when he's about to die, and he's holding his tzitzis and he's sobbing. And why is he sobbing? He's saying, because in this world, it's a world of mitzvahs. You have opportunities to do mitzvahs. Once you're dead, you can't do a single mitzvah. Nothing. And here, for a few kopecks, for a few shekels, right, for a few rubles, for a few dollars, you could buy yourself a mitzvah. And it's almost free. It's incredible. And now he realized he was about to die, and he was just sobbing over the lost opportunity. And it's the tzitzis. What the tzitzis means, I really don't want to go over time because you guys won't come back next time. So
We will.
everyone's like, oh, we're good to go, but then no, he'll say, I'm a little tired. The rabbi has a way of going over time. That's why I know it's minus EV, as they say, minus expected value when you go overtime. And they are to place upon the tzitzis of each corner a thread of tchelah. So if you see people today, there are people today that there's two kinds of tchelas that people found. Tchelas is this blue dye made out of the blood of some exotic snail.
Which is non-kosher, right?
Which, yeah, apparently.
Snakes are not kosher.
Yeah, so why would they use a non-kosher animal? Good question. You've asked that before. You're recycling your questions as Brandon. Peter, I'm not the only
There's
one.
another example.
I'm not the only one recycling content. Good to know. But the
That's another example. I don't remember what the other. When they were cutting the pyramid bricks.
oh yeah, okay.
If that's the case, then why is it like companies like Eckler's, they sell,
Who? Eichlers, yeah.
they sell the blue to so
Yeah. So but which one is it? In the late 19th century, there was this Hasidic Rebbe that made it his life mission to find this animal. Problem is that we don't have no tradition what the animal was. All we have is descriptions of the animal. So the fact that the descriptions that we have correlate to the animal that you found, that doesn't mean it's necessarily not necessarily. If I say, hey, there's an animal that's small and white. It could be a rabbit. It could be a cat. I say, oh, I'm looking for a small white animal and I found a rabbit. But no, you're looking for a cat, right? It's a weird analogy, but right. But that makes sense, right? Just because you fit the bill doesn't mean that that's actually the right thing. So they found another one. They found that now there's two. When you probably go to Eichels, you can probably find two different kinds of tchelas. Either way, mine are all white because most people just wear just white. Oh, this is such a controversy. Oh my goodness, I can talk for another 2 hours about this right now. But it's a big question. Maybe we'll hold off on this. But I think it's like peculiarity. Should you wear it now? Would you have anything to lose by wearing it, or not? What are the characteristics? Do these animals actually fall into the categories like which one's right, which one's wrong?
You start wearing it when you're bar mitzvah or what?
My kids wear tzitzis. I usually at the age of 3 or even earlier would give them, but I don't put guns to their heads. I'd say if a kid doesn't wear tzitzis in the morning, like he's sweaty, whatever, I don't make a big deal about it.
And for some reason, it doesn't sound right putting a gun into a 3-year-old. Maybe mine.
Putting what?
A gun into a 3-year-old.
Yeah, well, for the child, the trauma of being told no candy, that's equal to the trauma of an adult having a gun put to that.
Yes, you have candies if you don't put your tzitzit. Yeah.
That's what I meant. I'm talking to adults here, so I'm trying to describe what power a parent could wield over their child. By closing the spigot of candy, the spigot of sugar. Anyhow, let's finish here. And it says it's for you. You may wear it and remember the commandments of Hashem and perform them. And not explore after your eyes and after your hearts with your eyes, after which you will stray, so that you may remember and perform the mitzvahs and be holy to your God. I am Hashem your God who has removed you from the land of Egypt to be a God to you. I am Hashem your God. It is true. We have a video. How does Tzitzis remind us about all the mitzvahs? Good question. Maybe we'll answer it next time, guys. Lots of fun, everyone. I apologize greatly for going overtime.